God is at move within the Latino community, within the Latino world, both in Latin America and among Latinos here in the United States. And we want to be a part of what God is doing. In the U.S., there's 55 or 56.5 million Latinos, account for nearly half the population growth since the year 2000. And within the church, more broadly speaking, across denominations, it's the fastest growing demographic. So we're asking, as the Anglican Church, how can we join in what God's doing? How can we be a part of this great move of God within the Latino community, immigrant community, as God is moving peoples across borders, across nations, here to North America and throughout the Americas. Who is Caminemos Juntos? It means let's walk together in Spanish. It's nice. All you have to do is add an H after the N and it becomes Portuguese. We have, if you are familiar with AMIC is, I was just there last week, it's the Asian and Multicultural Ministries in Canada network. But it's a network within the ACNA and within the Americas for Latinos. It began in 2009 as the ACNA was starting in the United States, and we said we wanted to have Latino ministry at the heart of this new province that was beginning. Archbishop Bob Duncan was at our first consultation in Chicago. And then out of that, slowly our vision began expanding as we met Bishop Tito Zavala from Chile, as we met Bishop Miguel from Brazil. We said we can't just limit our focus on what is happening here. We partly need the help of our brothers and sisters in the global south. We need to be a part of that polycentric mission that Jason Mandrick spoke about today. And as the church is rapidly growing in the south, we want their help even to reach Latinos here, but we want to connect this. We want to be one family because we thought that it's actually better together. We have this, as we were beginning and trying to come up with a name, I was reading this book called Caminemos con Jesús, toward the Hispanic Latino theology of accompaniment. I don't recommend the whole book, but there's from the very first page a quote that really grabbed me. It says, it's from a famous poem in Spanish by a Cuban author. Caminante no hay camino means walker, there is no path or there is no way before you. And the poem continues, says, se hace camino al andar, you make the path by walking it. But there's that phrase, caminante no hay camino, walker, there is no way. And then it goes on, and there's a second phrase, caminemos con Jesús, let's walk with Jesus. And the quote goes on and says, the first is a cry of the exile, forced to enter the solitude of living in a foreign country. The other, caminemos con Jesús, let's walk with Jesus, is the cry of that same person who, though is living in exile, has discovered a new home. But that new home or that new family isn't just a physical space with economic stability and security, but a community of persons who, being exiled themselves, are together walking with Jesus. So this is a little bit of where our name comes from. We want to be that family together, even as we think of the church in 1 Peter being described as an immigrant or a church of exiles. How do we together be a people on mission with Jesus? This is our team of directors after one of our conferences in Brazil a couple years ago. Archbishop Foley spoke at one of our conferences. We must reach out and touch the various populations of Hispanic Americans God has brought us. Archbishop Kwashi, he spoke at our conference in Chile. He said, we need Caminemos Juntos in Africa. Not sure exactly what that would look like, but we have, so what do we do? Just real quickly, again, just short on time today, but we have a worship movement, and so we believe that music is part of the Latino soul, and that actually through singing a new song is often how the church is renewed and goes out on mission. If you think of John and Charles Wesley, both writing songs and planting churches. And so we gather together, we partner with a movement called United Adoration, and at each of our conferences bring together Latino songwriters and have written missional songs in English, Spanish, Portuguese, which we sing together and as part of our movement. You can find those songs unitedadoration.com, and we have a CD here you can purchase for $2 if you want, but they're on Spotify if you look up Adoremos Juntos as well. So we sing new songs together. We do Latino leadership training and development. We have online cohorts where we train and equip Latino leaders, specifically here in the U.S., but also throughout Latin America. We have an intercessory network. This is a group of intercessors in Bishop Miguel's church in Brazil. And once a month we have an online time where we gather all of our leaders from across the Americas to pray together. As Jason also said today, how do we participate in the move of God? We learn to pray together. So I think that the center of the intercessory world is Recife, Brazil. That's where there's just this passion for intercession. Bishop Miguel, can you tell us a little bit about what intercession looks like in Recife, the intercessory teams there, some of the people maybe? Or?
Well, we try to make the intercession not a ministry in the church, but as the whole body of the church to be intercessors. We really tell the people that we don't want to have a group of intercession in a room, and when they pass and everybody in the church say, oh, you see, this is the intercessor. There'll be 4 people walking like this. Oh, they are the prayer. No, this is for everybody. Everybody needs to be on the knees and praying. So there is a leading group, but we try to more and more to try to tell the congregation that intercession is for everyone. We need that for the whole church. That's why it's
yeah, and from my living room in Chicago on a screen, I feel the prayers of the intercessors in Brazil as we're praying together. Could you share the testimony about the intercessors in Brazil praying for?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that when Bishop Miguel was talking. I got to go to Caminemos Juntos for the first time in the one in Chile. The first one we went to, was that in 2016?
I think 2016.
Anyway, and we were divided into small groups there, and our group got really close. Ours was a group of women, and from Argentina, from Brazil, a couple of us from Chile, and we made a little group on, like a little WhatsApp group, and we kept connected. We shared a devotional every day, different things. And a year later, my niece developed cancer, and I asked the people in my little group to pray, and the one gal who was from your church in Recife said, could I share that with my intercessory prayer group? And I said, well, of course. And she said, we want to set up a WhatsApp group for your niece. So it was called Oración in Portuguese. How do you say it?
Oração.
Yeah, Oración for Rebecca, my niece. And my niece has been healed completely from that cancer and is walking today. And it was really exciting just to, not only make that connection there for that one weekend, but to be connected to the point that they were willing to take on that prayer request. And they would write, every day people would put things on that thing, and just that they were praying for her, and they would send music, and it was just very, very special. And so I was able to tell her that there were people not only in Chile praying in Spanish for her, but also people in Brazil praying in Portuguese for her. So,
amen. We really believe that prayer and worship are at the heart of mission. And if we can revive that furnace of prayer and worship, we will also see an explosion of mission. And then we plant churches, and we're using specifically a model that really is being used in Brazil and Cuba and many places of the world called disciple-making movements, which is focused on houses of peace and really building up churches from the ground up, starting with non-believers. So we'll have Jose David share a little bit about his testimony, and he's actually we have an online, one of our online cohorts in Spanish is on disciple-making. Yadid here with me, we're teaching on multiplying disciples, and Jose David is part of that from Los Angeles, and is connected to his own testimony as well.
So we have 1 minute to share this, and life with Christ, if you're in the mission, can be lonely. If you're following Him and the culture in the church is not doing what you're doing. So sometimes it felt lonely to try to make disciples and focus on discipleship, while the church was focusing on more attracting people to the service, and it could feel lonely. So Caminemos Juntos offered me the coaching, and it was a great place to connect, and through the coaching online sessions, be encouraged by other people in America that are struggling with the same things. I have this passion for discipleship, but I don't have a church that is connecting the dots together and helping me oh, so we would hear from someone in Brazil that is already experiencing with his church, and he would tell us his testimony, and that's really encouraging.
And share your personal testimony of how you met the Lord. Yeah.
Yeah, Caminemos Juntos, and this way of understanding church and helping us to fulfill the Great Commissions and actually do discipleship is at the core of my faith, because I met the Lord when I was 20 years old. I'm 30 now, and I met him in a very organic setting at my mom's house, because she divorced my dad when I was 1, and for 15 years she was like a single mom that had a faith in Jesus, but didn't have a church, so I would never go visit or experience God. But then when I was 15, she remarried this guy in Sweden, and she moved there. They met online, by the way, 50 years ago. And both faked it that they were in California, which is it's weird. And now I'm in California, so it's like, God, what do you have with this? Both were like
Polycentric mission.
he was like, I'm tired of European girls that are the girls that he had experienced liberal and cheated on him, and he's like, I just want to chill, laid back Christian girl from California. And my mom was like, I'm tired of these Latinos that don't want to marry me and take care of my children and only want to flirt with me, and she was like, okay, I'm going to sign up in California. Both faked it and made it. But when I was like 18, I flew to visit them, and maybe you take it for granted, but for me, because my dad is not a believer and has like problems with his emotions and it's hard to be around him, I never had a breakfast full of love and joy and peace and yeah, that's how I met the Lord. And that love in that community opened my heart to Jesus, and then I watched the Jesus films.
Through the husband of your...
Yeah, a YouTube film about Jesus that goes verse by verse enacting Acts and Paul. It's called the Visual Bible. Beautiful thing. And that's how I met the Lord, in a home setting full of love where I was. So I think the vision of doing disciples as we're going, it's at the heart of my faith, but I cannot do it alone, and I need to be in touch with people that are doing. And sometimes you're in a city and in a season where you're not connected with someone with the same vision, and it's good to team up and not lose the fight.
Thank you. Thanks for that testimony. Our time is up, but that gives you a little bit of a picture of who we are with Caminemos Juntos. We have 15 minutes now of conversation together. They asked us to present for 15 minutes and then to have quite a conversation. Just as far as some next steps, if you didn't receive one of these cards, did anyone get a next step card? One of the multiply ones. If you didn't, just encourage you to there's different ways you can be a part of what Caminemos Juntos is doing. There's several options there on your card. If you could fill that out and give that back to Jose David here at the end. But we have our next North America conference in Santa Rosa, California, July 30th next summer. We usually do an annual conference in the U.S. and then usually every about 2 years or so we have a conference in South America, and that will be
in Recife in
October of 2020, so in a year. So those are our next conferences. We'd love to have you a part if you want to be part of our mailing list, or you can follow us on social media. We have an English and Spanish page, Caminemos Juntos English, if you look it up on Facebook. We also have online coaching groups. We have an online coaching group in English specifically, and I have some flyers for that as well here on the table. If you want an introduction to Latino ministry, or your church is wanting to figure out how to reach Latinos here in the U.S., we have a group that's already started, but we're going to make an exception if there's anyone who wants to join up. It's an every other Thursday at 11 a.m. Central for an hour and a half video call. We're going to have 5 different leaders from around the U.S. who are saying, because we want to learn how we can, as our church, reach out to Latinos in our area. If you're interested in being a part of that, grab one of these or talk to me or Jose David. This Thursday we have an open video call. Many of you know Danny Carroll. He's a Guatemalan-American professor at Wheaton College, Anglican, who wrote Christians at the Border, Christian Theology of Immigration. He's going to be speaking and doing a Q&A with us this coming Thursday, again at 11 Central. If you want to jump on, I can give you the link. It'll be an hour and a half video call that were just different tools to help you as a church engage with multicultural ministry, Latino ministry, and some of the issues that come up as you're reaching Latinos. So we also have some of these CDs that we mentioned on sale for $2. We have actually some more, but you can also find them for free. So that's our presentation. Now we have about 15 minutes of just conversation, Q&A, comments. Yeah.
Is Caminemos Juntos strictly Anglican, or is it multi-denominational?
So our conference is open to anybody, and at our conferences we have folks from often different backgrounds, but it's definitely rooted in the Anglican Church, and we plant Anglican churches. So we're kind of, it's a little bit of both. And even in the U.S., it's bilingual, and so it's English and Spanish. And so if you're only English speaker or only Spanish speaker, you can come to our events. And then in Latin America, it's usually lightly trilingual, so we have Portuguese, English, and Spanish. So you can jump in any of those languages. Other questions, comments, or thoughts? What struck you from the video? Anything stand out to you from the video there at the beginning? I know there's a lot hitting you real quickly, but any of those stats or?
There are so many Latinos in the U.S.
Yeah.
I never thought there were so many.
Yeah.
And it's not just one area, it's the entire nation.
Yeah, it's every major city in the U.S. is at least 30% Latino.
Yeah, in my county, basically I'm counting Virginia, is almost 40%.
Yeah. Chicago, where I live, is about 30%. LA is over 50%. New York City is 30%. States of New Mexico, Arizona, California, Florida, probably a couple others are at least, if not over 50%.
When you're talking about planning a church, are you thinking of only Latinos and only speaking Spanish? Or I would love to come to a church together.
There's all kinds of models and ways to do it. We have bilingual churches that are fully English and Spanish. We have some that are, say, predominantly English-speaking, maybe white American church that starts a Spanish-speaking church, maybe in their building at a different time. We have, and then there's like everyone together every week, multicultural, multilingual. So it depends a lot on the context, depends on a lot of the team that you have, the resources. But there's all kinds of different churches.
I mean, that's a great question because, for example, my kids, I'm from Nicaragua, but English is their primary language.
Yeah.
In Spanish is like,
Yeah.
So they would love to, but I mean, but they would prefer to be in English.
Yeah, and this is why we talk about the second generation ministry. That I think I had it on one of the slides. We have maybe I missed it. It's in our Spanish presentation. We have it's called New Generation. Is a English speaking network within our movement for Latinos born and raised here in the U.S. And Eddie Davila is Nicaraguan, born in grew up in Miami, so he's works with me.
What I have noticed here in an ethnic church is that the first generation would maybe love to be in their own language service, or the first generation, but the second generation not, like your kids. I have a good example here in Orlando, the First Baptist in Orlando. I think they did a good model because it's a large church, it's a Baptist church. They have the English, I think it's in English. They have a Brazilian congregation, Portuguese congregation within the church. So they have a separate service in Portuguese, a Brazilian pastor. There's hundreds of Brazilian goes to them. And they have only in English or in Portuguese until the 6 years old kids. I don't know which grade is here.
First grade. Maybe.
First grade. Until first grade, they still Portuguese. After that,
All English. It's all integrated. Both congregations.
Both congregations. So it's one church within the other, but it works like one church, and everybody's pleased. The first and the second generation, and also they can taste the culture, the Brazilian culture or the Latino culture. They can enjoy that, but they can keep the English because for the teenagers and
That's what
they
it
really
is.
want to speak English. That's a fact. They have to deal with that.
So that's one model. There's the fully bilingual every week, which is harder, but that some churches do that. Yeah. Other thoughts or comments?
There was a hand. just answered my question.
Oh, okay. Oh, there you go. Yeah. And part of what our job with our work with Caminemos Juntos is to help you figure out what would work best in your context. And so if you're wanting to,
There is a pastor in our church. He's originally from. I mean, he's from Colombia. His first language is English, but he's also trying to do something with the Latinos. So he would be a great.
What church are you in?
All Saints in Woodbridge, Virginia, and his name is Mario Sandoval.
Oh yeah, yeah. I know Mario. Yeah, he came to one of our conferences.
Oh, you know Mario?
Yeah.
Okay.
He just was ordained to the priesthood.
Yes,
I think,
yes,
like
yes,
3
yes.
weeks ago. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know him well, but he came to one of
He's
our
a great
conferences.
guy.
Wonderful.
Can you say more about the disciple-making model?
Yeah. There's it's very so kind of we've tried to ask the question, how can we start churches without money, without buildings, without clergy? Probably the three things. See, you guys, they're doing a math talk as well, so go to theirs next. A lot of, in the United States, a lot of our immigrant communities don't have those three, but those are also, even among white American or around the world, tend to be the biggest blocks for planting churches and making things the slowest. You got to get a building, you got to get a paid full-time staff, and then also who's ordained, and that's usually a long process. And so we've been kind of studying like the East African revival, for example, and the Anglican church, but also things like the Methodist movement, really what's happening now in Brazil, how the church has grown in Cuba. So there's this whole world called DMM, or disciple-making movements, which is, it's actually very big in the Baptist world, but a lot of the Pentecostals have used it as well. And so we've tried to bring it in and say, how do we use it in a Latino context, but also in an Anglican context, we can modify some things. But it's essentially, like with our online trainings, we're equipping people in a very basic, simple way to actually take discipleship to the places where people are, instead of trying to invite people to Sunday service. You're trying to, with Jesus and Zacchaeus, come down from that tree, I want to go to your home today. And Zacchaeus, as a person of peace, brings his community to Jesus. And so, especially when you're reaching immigrant or niche communities isn't the right way, but certain cultural groups that you can't integrate them necessarily into your Sunday existing service. So instead, how do you find those people of peace who are already leaders in their community? You go through them like Zacchaeus, and often in their homes, that's often where the church is born. Right. So it sounds, I mean, for me, it's been about a 5-year journey. Being in Brazil was revolutionary to see it in an Anglican Latino context. After reading a lot of Baptist books and things about it, we're just very, very, if you have two people, it's a church, and we said, well, we're not that. We believe in, bishops and connection and structure, but there was a way where actually it's working. I think they could speak more on that.
Yeah, I think that's the piece that I was thinking about, because I'm somewhat familiar with the Baptist kind of Pentecostal context, and like have had the experience of like, oh, this is the church, and it's 3 people, or 4 people, and there's a lot that's praiseworthy to that.
Totally.
But then how that connects with kind of like
structure and authority, and so we bring that in, and part of it is just an equipping the kind of everyday Christian to reach their community, but then connecting it to the authority and things like that.
So in my community, most of the Spanish-speaking people would be in labor jobs and whatnot, and can't make it to my Sunday service.
Yeah, so this meets that problem specifically.
Okay.
So when I was in Canada last week, they have a restaurant workers called Taste of Life Fellowship, and they meet at 10 p.m. on Wednesday nights. That's how they fit that context. But this would be finding ways to, instead of trying to adapt their work schedules to your Sunday service, you're adapting your mission to their work schedules. And so,
here's an Anglican priest that wants to do that.
Yeah, and it doesn't even, we can work with you, and it would be, the first part is helping you find within that community who's a person who isn't even necessarily a Christian yet, but who's hungry for the gospel.
And that's exactly where I was going.
Okay, yeah, well, let's talk about that. Okay. But yeah, first the person of peace, and you pray, and you find that person. So I'll just tell you a 2-minute story. In my neighborhood, I live in a 60,000 person neighborhood in Chicago, 99% Mexican Cultural Village. And we've been praying, started a church, praying for person of peace, went to a little ice cream shop, tried to kind of do my church email admin work, but in the community, hoping and praying I'd meet somebody. Within 2 minutes of walking in, the ice cream shop owner is sitting in front of me telling me his life story and pouring out his soul and crying. And he thought he knew me from before, and I don't think I'd met him before, but it's usually kind of a strange...
What's a vision?
Yeah. And that's kind of what happens when people, peace have already been prepared ahead of time. And so then he's saying, I need peace in my life. I said, well, we're doing this thing called Houses of Peace. And I said, well, let's do it right here. And so it wasn't a house of peace, it was an ice cream shop of peace. And so we did, he brought his friends, he knew everyone in the neighborhood because, and he can't go to church because he's working Sundays, but everyone in the neighborhood goes there to buy ice cream, called azúcar, sugar. And he invited all the people, like, he probably invited 10 people, 3 or 4 ended up coming. I didn't know any of them, he knew them, and that's, there we had a Discovery Bible study on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. because no one buys ice cream at that time.
I tell everyone I'm willing to go to bar rooms, billiard halls,
Yeah.
and bowling alleys. That's
Yeah, well, that's how, and then that's how it happens. So he's a classic kind of person of peace in that sense.
When you're at that ice cream shop and like being do you wear your collar?
Yeah, so I think it depends a lot on your context again and your community. What does it mean there? I didn't, partly because I'm trying to model for my church that anybody can do this.
Yeah.
And if I wear a collar, then oh, of course you can do it because everyone talks to you with a collar. So I, at the beginning, tried to actually not use my collar. I didn't even talk much about, we actually didn't have a church yet in the community, so I didn't even necessarily present myself as a pastor. Other times I do, and yeah. And then you're trying to be able to say, yeah, anybody can do this. Yeah, that's the point. We're done. Yeah, yeah.
Maybe the accountability piece is great.
Yeah,
explain that. DMM is we all hear from the Spirit, and we all have like a hunch of like, oh, I should speak to that person, or I should pray for my cousin, or I should do this. But we let that go, and we just snooze the Holy Spirit pumping, and we just don't follow through, right? So it's a great like emphasis on this strategy or way to do things, to write down what the Spirit says about doing evangelism and sharing. And then the next week, after you have shared with someone, follow through and see if you've been faithful to it.
The group asked you, how did it go? Sharing with Lupita.
Yeah, how did it go? So it emphasizes a lot on accountability and following through. Not to be legalistic, but to help each other and follow through it and get excited about the testimonies. And so that's I think one of the beauties that creates motions and energy. And
Thank you for being with us.